reading from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, if I preach the gospel, this is no reason for me to boast, for an obligation has been imposed on me, and woe to me if I do not preach it. If I do so willingly, I have a recompense, but if unwillingly, then I have been entrusted with a stewardship. What then is my recompense? That when I preach, I offer the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my right in the gospel. Although I am free in regard to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so as to win over as many as possible. To the weak, I became weak, to win over the weak. I have become all things to all, to save at least some. All this I do for the sake of the gospel, so that I too may have a share in it. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday, Pro-Life Sunday, comes from the letter of Paul to the Corinthians, the first letter. We have been reflecting on Job's description of life, which is a common experience of people who find life burdensome. And Job ends the first reading by saying, I shall not see happiness again. But we said, wait, do not despair. God listens to people who pray, people who voice to God their concerns about life. Now, the happiness of life, where do we find it? In the second reading, St. Paul's life is also quite burdensome. As an apostle, he goes around preaching and he meets a lot of opposition. But it seems, in this portion of the first letter to the Corinthians, St. Paul feels fulfilled and quite happy and zealous, facing a life that is far from being easy and happy according to the standards of the world. Now, we want to ask St. Paul, how do you find life? And what is life for you? Maybe St. Paul would give us two directions. He is an apostle. So for him, life is in mission. You find the meaning of life in mission, preaching the Word of God. And for him, the opposite is refraining from preaching the Word of God. But when he stops preaching the Word of God, then that is the end of his life. Woe to me! I am cursed. My life has no meaning if I deviate from my mission. Now, we know that the mission of preaching the Word of God is not easy. It brings you to a life of trials. You earn a lot of enemies and opposition because the Word of God is not easily welcomed by people. But for someone like St. Paul, whose life is in mission, even the trials become the source of happiness. Instead of leading them to despair, they lead missioners to renewed vigor. Mission is one secret of a joyful, meaningful, and zealous life, as evidenced in St. Paul. The second is, because of his mission, St. Paul became all things to all people. Now, I want to interpret it in terms of compassion. He wants to win, through the Word of God, many people to salvation. That is his mission. And to win many people to God's saving action, he wanted himself to be the compassionate presence of God. To the weak, he became weak. He became all things to all people. For one purpose alone, so that they could somehow hear the Word of God, fall in love with the Word of God, and be saved. This is another source of life, compassion for our neighbors, being in solidarity with them, sharing in their joys and hopes, not in order to manipulate them, not in order to use them, but in order to win them for the Word of God. Now, the life of St. Paul is not easy. We have two persons now, Job and Paul. Both of them experienced the heaviness of life. Job prayed to God when he experienced this heaviness, and we know God will hear his prayer. Paul finds reason to keep going in this difficult life. And where did he find the reasons? In mission and solidarity, compassion with neighbors. You, my dear brothers and sisters, where do you find the meaning of life? Where do you find life? This is Pro-Life Sunday. So we are being asked, what is the quality of your life? It is meant for mission. It is meant for compassion.